Go ahead and get comfortable and settle into your seat because we're going to get into some deep spiritual nuggets today. And make sure that as you roll in here, really feel the sensation of being and what that means to you. And just notice what it's like to exist in this moment as it is. And forget about the past, don't worry about the future. Just settle into the godliness of the moment. And with that, we're going to get right into the presentation for you guys today because I want to talk more about breaking free into godliness by embracing the human limitations. Because if we didn't really have these limitations, it really wouldn't play as a significant impact on us as it really does. And the human limitations are actually a way to help us recognize our own sense of inner freedom and authority. Because in order to have authority and to know the true meaning of authority, you have to follow it until you recognize that the responsibility was always on you to begin with. And so let's talk about the true nature of godliness. It is not about manipulating or controlling. Godliness is about just creating anyway. Don't worry about the output, just worry about the input. And of course, there's going to be ways in which you are going to be measured by the results that you have, but it doesn't really matter when you're actually creating. And to be creative and the impulse to create, that is the offering unto the existence, and it is not the reward. The reward is not just being to try to be something, it's to just be. And that is why godliness does not need to prove anything, and it doesn't need proof in order to be transformative. Too many people want to have things be proven, and the thing is that I understand this, and I myself am very focused on verification. Any of the Regal change old timers will definitely be aware of this, that I focus primarily on ensuring that if we cannot verify it from multiple sources, then the probability of it even being true to begin with is going to be very not likely. And the reason behind that is because tangibility in this experience, like the Greeks had two different ways of operating when it came to knowing something versus believing something. When it came to knowing something, you could know about mathematics or science or anything of the sort. But when it came to relationships, there's a sense of knowing in the relationship. You exist in the relationship. It's not just you. It is just you, but it's also not just you. That's the paradox. And this is where you don't really need to prove that you're having an experience right now, right? You don't need to prove that you have something that is transforming you. Like this video in of itself is transforming you right now. My words, speaking from a soulful place, ought to be enough for you to really feel the gravity, and not even the gravity. I like to use the term density because gravity, I don't necessarily believe in gravity. I think that the theory of relativity is very important, and I think the gravity of like the mathematic work behind Isaac Newton's gravity is very interesting and compelling, but I don't think calling it gravity in the modern day sense is going to help because science in the modern day has become a religion, and that religion is really making everybody pay a price that was never ours to pay anyway. And if we don't conform to these frameworks, then we're the ones that get punished, whether it's through peer review or whether it's through just being accepted as something that isn't going to be easily dismissive. And there's been many people who I've seen that in their work, and one that I'm thinking about in particular right now is Eric Weinstein's geometric unity. Now, do I like everything that Eric Weinstein has to say? No, but I really enjoy the intellectual prowess that he brings to the table. And his theory of geometric unity, if you've never checked it out, it's very much worth a check out because it is transformative. And I think it's more probable than the gravity situation. Like we've been in the field of physics that we're in for centuries, or excuse me, decades. It's been nearly a century, maybe a little bit longer. But the point is that we've been basically stuck. There's been no basic forms of progress to be made. And it's because I genuinely think we're not allowing the limitation of our humanness to outweigh the uh, well, we are letting our limitation of humanness outweigh the forms of godliness that could be expressed. And it's not to say that the limitation of humanness is a negative attribute. It is something that actually is to be harnessed because limits are allies to the one who has godlike mastery. They're not adversaries. Now, what exactly does this mean? It means that you can recognize your limits and be okay with them and accept them. Like, for example, maybe you're struggling with lustful desires right now, or maybe you're going through a particularly hard time when it comes to trying to transcend certain edging, or maybe you're interested in learning more about certain things, but you can't quite keep up with the language. And maybe you're at the gym and you're wanting to lift more weight, but you can't lift more weight. If you've never been to the gym before, which I hope most of you have been, but if you've never been to the gym before, you can't go in there expecting to bench 225 pounds on the bench press. There's just no way you're going to be able to do that if you've never gone to the gym, unless you're like and here we come with the people. Oh, well, there's the exception. Okay, well, there's the exception. Generally speaking, you're never going to be able to go into the gym and just lift 225 pounds on the bench press just because you have to work up to it. And so there's that limitation, and the limitation allows you to see where you can grow more in. And that's why limits can be seen as an ally and not an adversary. Think about this in finances as well. If you maybe you have a year's worth of cash flow saved up, right? And you don't really feel the need to, like, if you just got laid off or something like that, right? You're like, okay, well, I don't really feel the need to get going again. I mean, what you could do is you can use that limitation as a way to increase your creativity. And this is where I call creativity symbolic differentiation. Because sometimes when it comes to the human constraints, you wouldn't know how to truly differentiate and create some kind of form of structure or some kind unless you were able to be put in that complexity of the constraint. And so symbolic differentiation is essentially providing structure. You're not always, when you're being creative, you're not always trying to tell a story about yourself or the other people around you or whatever. Maybe sometimes, consider this, maybe sometimes your focus for creativity or symbolic differentiation, as I call it, ought to be more focused on just the creative structure and the the timeline in which you're in that is demonstrating these types of things. So don't let the limitation of humanness outweigh the forms of godliness. But if something is going to be transformative, then it will matter at the end of the day or at the end of the transformation, right? It doesn't always need proof. Like, for example, the story of Jesus Christ, very powerful, very potent. However, we don't really have true verification. We have some substrates of verification that Jesus Christ was a physical person, but that doesn't really matter. What matters is the story which transforms you ultimately, and that's what's most important. And we don't need to debate whether or not he was real or wasn't real because we just simply can't verify it. And people will say, well, the Shroud of Turin. It's like, well, who funded the funding for the Shroud of Turin? Okay, who follow the money there and see where you go, and then you'll find out that maybe things aren't exactly the way that you see them. But that's a story for another time. So this is also why some spiritual battles appear. So when you are breaking free of the human qualities and into godliness, sometimes there will be spiritual destructions that seem like obstructions, but they were not really obstructions. Though they were a reality that is recalibrating on the physical plane through time. So think about this, for example. Something very strange happened to me yesterday, and it was a very bizarre experience. There were multiple occasions in which there was a what I call a pattern convergent signal demonstrating that there was some type of shift in my timeline. Now, what exactly was that? Well, number one, when I first got to the gym yesterday morning, and I like to just get up and raw dog the gym. I don't do headphones, I don't do pre workout, I don't do any of that. I'm very natural and I'm very just, let's get going. And so I woke up and I went to the gym. And what happened when I was there was that there was these very strange occurrences where an old man suddenly just blocked my way, and he was walking with a cane, and he just started to walk, like, seemed deliberately trying to get in my way. And I just patiently waited and didn't think much of it, and I moved around him when the time was right and went from there. Then, just about an hour later or so, I was going into the locker room to get into the sauna. And when I got into the sauna, someone tried to put me out of my position in which I was going to sit down. And it was very strange, right? It was a very strange experience. Then I went to the grocery store afterward. And when I was there, I was walking through one of the aisles, and all of a sudden, these two workers came out of nowhere with big, huge grocery carts filled with stuff. And they were workers, obviously, because I could see that they had their uniforms on, and they're bright red uniforms. It's kind of hard to miss. And so they just parked right in the middle of the aisle in which I was walking, and they seemed to come out of nowhere. And then one of the workers said, "Oh, sorry, I guess we're all blocking your way today." Very strange. Like, that was a pattern, convergent signal right there. And that was a very strange experience, right? That was a very bizarre experience. And then I come out of the grocery store, and sure enough, as I'm going to leave the parking lot, someone tries to block me and wait for another spot that's closer to the grocery store than mine was. And so they're blocking me, and because they're wanting to wait to get a closer spot. And I just thought to myself, okay, that's four occurrences in less than like 2 hours, 3 hours, that had this same pattern occur throughout the day. And then I worked on a project for like 5 hours, only to have something very bizarre happen where I realized that I couldn't fulfill certain things in the project. And so after 5 hours of work, I basically had to start from scratch again. And it was at that moment that I said to myself, okay, what exactly is happening here? Because this seems like an obstruction, but it's not. It's a destruction. But that doesn't mean that it's bad. It's just a form of reality recalibrating on the physical plane through time. The way that I saw it was that it's just water off a duck's back, basically. It's just been a rainy day. And I moved onward and through time and just continued focus on my project that I was working on. And when the path is blocked, sometimes it's blocked for your own good. This is something that you have to recognize because maybe you haven't learned or done everything you need to do to get to that point in which you want to make something happen. That's exactly what happened with my project yesterday. And it was as if, because some people who are Christians or any type of religious spirit or any type of religionist, I'd prefer to call them religionist more so because that's what they are. They're an ism of religion. And they might call that witchcraft and whatnot. And that could be true, sure. But I don't even want to give that energy. I don't want to give them the satisfaction, or it's not even giving them, it's the construct, it's the reality that is associating itself through me into truth, because there's a difference between reality and truth. Reality, it is real that there are illusions, right? But the illusions are not true. So there are realities that are elusive, but truth is always going to be a reality. And this is exactly what I felt coming through to my new form and my new way of being after that project yesterday. I was able to recalibrate and I recognized that the path was blocked, maybe for my own good, because I wasn't quite ready to do what I needed to. And that's that. I can move on. So here's a thought experiment for you then. If time itself is nonlinear, because if you're operating from the fourth dimension or the fifth dimension, so to speak, and when I say that, what I mean is that you're operating from an inward place of timelessness, in the sense that you are not operating on linear time, because linear time only happens on the individual timeline or the watch timeline, where the sun goes up, the sun goes down, the moon rises, the moon falls. It's 1 o'clock, it's 12 o'clock, it's whatever o'clock. That's watch time. But individual time is the individual psychic experiences of time, and then you can recall it linearly through memory. But time itself is non-linear. And the story of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, for example, demonstrates that precisely. And in the Gospel of Thomas, there's even a quote that says something along the lines of, "Whoever tastes the elixir of life shall never know death," something along those lines, right? And the Gospel of Thomas is something that is very interesting because it is a form of Gnostic perception of reality. And it's not to say that it's right or wrong or it's better or it's worse, just like the Christian perspective or the Muslim perspective or Buddha, like everybody has a form of which they're looking at godliness or God or whatever source, whatever it is that you want to call it. I prefer the term godliness because I don't want to think about it as a noun necessarily. Like I mentioned this sage recently, Osho, and he said that nouns don't grow, verbs grow. And if you make God a quality, it can continually grow. And that's because it's a verb. And to me, that makes a whole lot of sense because for as long as I figured and thought about God outside of myself, even though I knew the kingdom of God was within me, as long as I felt as though God was outside of me, I was never really able to see nonlinear time. And that makes sense, right? That makes sense because I was made to believe through the Christian doctrine that my past struggles will affect my future, that I am stuck with my sins forever. And I truly believed that because I had many experiences that would confirm this belief. But the way that this simulation and the construct of reality works is that the more you think about certain things, the more that that appears, right? It's kind of like in the movie Inception, where they give the example of, well, if I tell you not to think about pink elephants or whatever, what do you think about? Well, I think about pink elephants. And why is that? Well, because you told me not to. Okay, well, so in the same type of way, I truly think and have reached a conclusion in which that is not a final conclusion, by the way, because I don't think that there are any final conclusions. I think that would be missing the point because this whole thing is a process. And everything that I'm doing and saying right now, I know that in the spirit of this time, I am living it as if it's the truth because that is to where, like, living out these things has gotten me to the point in which I am today. And so, living in nonlinear time, but recognizing that I, as a human experience, like, if I were to say that I'm a God living a human experience, not to say that I see myself as more superior or less than or whatever the case or more superficial or whatever the case, whatever label you religionists want to try to place me in, it's not going to work because I trust my own momentum right now. I've outgrown the need for authority outside of myself. And it's not to say that I don't revere that, it's that I can operate myself internally. And a lot of people might say, well, this is satanic. This is, what you're teaching here is demonic. It's like, well, but I'm not saying to not be accountable. Satanism, demonic people, they want you to not be accountable. They want you to be stuck in a hypnosis of lacking accountability. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying take responsibility. And I'm saying be accountable, be responsible. But you don't really need to be accountable or responsible for things outside of you unless you're playing a part in it. And yes, you are playing a part in it, but are you? This is where you have to be very mindful of this kind of thing and exactly the way that it works. So maybe the reason that spiritual battles are appearing to you is so that you can build in different times or different ways that disrupt the cycle of the past. Because past struggles do not need to affect the future. And this leads into the last part of this presentation, which is that the past is not a chain of events to the present. What makes you want to thrive in the physical world? A lot of people who live in linear time, they want to thrive in the physical world for safety or for, material gain or status gain or hierarchy. They want to attach their identity to what they have and who they perceive themselves to be, not who they actually are. So, one thing to ask yourself then is how would thriving in the physical world lower your anxiety if you were to thrive? If you were to thrive, what would that look like exactly? And Can you claim structure without trying to provide a prescription to people or to yourself? Because that is the whole point of godliness, is to claim structure without prescribing. And this is something that I'm guilty of. This is a confession of my own. And this is to say that for the duration that I claim to follow Christ, I I sought Jesus Christ as the prescription to people's problems. And I tried to be loving in a way that gave prescriptions. And that is not the way to be. That is not the way to be. When I considered myself a follower of Christ, and I still do to some degree, but not in the same way that people think. And so I'm just me. I'm just Thaddeus. I am the curator and the creator of the Regal Change brand and the Regal Change movement and the Regal Change Academy, all of these things that are attached to the Regal Change brand. That is me. I'm the architect for that, but I'm not prescribing these things anymore. In my one on one sessions or the Godlike Mastery offer that I do offer, it's not about prescribing, it's about giving structure so that other people don't have to go through unnecessary hell through trying to pop pills. They're trying to basically pop religionist pills into their psyche, and it's making these people spiritually ill, and they consider it a form of righteousness. And it's so crazy how this form of godliness, when you truly understand what it means to be a free spirit, you start to focus less and less on what people are saying and more of what people are doing in a way that is so beyond that which is considered to be proper discernment for most religions. And so you're looking at the essence of who someone is. You're not speaking to what they are. And that's the most powerful thing that you can even begin to grasp as you journey forth through this day and age, because we do live in an information war for all intents and purposes. And some of this information is anti-truth. Some of this information is designed to keep you in a chain to the present. But the thing is that once you, as an immortal soul, recognize that you are beyond the chain of the past, and in the perception of that, you're beyond your conception of whatever it is that you create in your mind, you are not measuring God anymore. You're just being and living in godliness. And that's the true essence. That's the true power of these stories and these narratives. Think about like all of the movies that you've ever seen, or all of the cartoons or the books that you've read. All of these are pointing toward a more proper truth. But to even be proper is to basically miss the point. All of these labels and limitations, because you can't truly speak on a lot of these things. You can't truly define the infinite, because to do so is to try to grasp water. You can't grasp water. It'll slip from your hands. But that's the whole point as well, is to recognize that you're not the thing that's grasping. You're the thing that is ever changing. And that in of itself is where the true power of godliness and breaking free and accepting the human limitations of this life come into play, because you are so much more powerful. You are so much more cool than anybody on the earth, on the face of this earth, wants to believe you are. And it's because most of the people are still trapped. They're trapped on these convergence timelines that are designed to keep them chained to the present moment. They're designed to be not everlasting. They're not designed to be empowering. They're designed to glorify suffering. And the types of conspiracies that I've seen about even myself as of recently are just so bizarre to me because I don't know whether to be flattered that some people can think that I am capable of such heinous acts because I would have to be so two faced and so conniving for so long that I would just be playing, like, I would be playing a character that it wasn't even my own creation. I would be playing a character that someone else designed for me. And in a way, maybe I did to some degree, but not consciously. Like this was an unconscious thing. Following Christ and glorifying suffering in the process. That was that was me trying to get a grasp and get an answer to that which is unanswerable because there are no true answers in this life. And so I don't know whether to be flattered about these people who are like being conspiratorial about who I am and what I'm about, or whether to be totally frightened and afraid of their lack of discernment. Because that just goes to show that there are so many people that think that they know something and they don't have the humility to accept that maybe they don't know everything. And that's the thing about me is that when I have contradictory data points that are going to contradict my own beliefs, I will examine that. I will accept that because I want to live in the truth. I don't want to live in a fake reality. I know that I already live in a fake reality. I want to live in a truth that is real to me. And that in of itself is enough. You're enough. I'm enough. We're enough. We just have been convoluted and convicted to this sense, false convictions, fake convictions, to believe that we have to be in this form of masochistic suffering in order to enjoy life. And to me, that's where I have this utmost disgust for the religionists because I totally understand what they say because consciousness does need suffering in order to be understood by itself. But who created that suffering? Was it you, or was it someone else, or was it a combination of both without you even knowing? Because if consciousness is real, then because consciousness can be real, but can it be true? I don't know. I am not certain that consciousness even exists at this point because who's to say if the past truly is not chained to the present, then what makes you think that you're not beyond this realm? You would have to be, and yet you wouldn't be at the same time. Consciousness exists, but not in the way that we think. And so, why do you want to thrive in this physical world where everything's fake and elusive anyway? And what would it do to lower your anxiety? Well, it would give you answers, but are they the real answers, or are they answers that are just going to tickle your ears long enough for you to feel like you've got something to say and you just know now, even though you don't know anything? Someone told you what to think, and you think that you're thinking when in reality and in truth, because truth is a reality, but reality is not always truth because you're thinking that you're thinking for yourself, but the only reason that you think that is because you've been programmed to think that way. So break free, be godly, but not in the sense of this dogmatic religious sense. Be free and live in accordance to that which is true and let die what is false. I hope everybody stays blessed out there. Peace until next time.